What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, June 5th, 2017, getting into the month of June, getting into summer, and all this other good stuff. We have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, dealing with all the tech gremlins which seem to be ganging up on us today, and obviously ready to answer your phone and put you on the air with your comments and questions. A couple of quick program notes. Our third hour guest today will be Gilad Otzman. He's going to be talking about his recent concert tour, his recent lecture tour, his new book, his being attacked by members of Antifa. On Thursday, we're going to have Phil Tourney and Dave Gehary talking about Israel's attack on the USS Liberty. And, of course, today is the anniversary of the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy and the attempt to create a crazed lone nut cover story for what was obviously a cover-up. And we reprised the recording of the intimidation of one of the witnesses. Now, a lot of witnesses to the Robert Kennedy assassination said that Sirhan was in the company of a woman in a polka dot dress. Sirhan appeared to be dazed. Apparently, this woman was literally dragging him around the hotel, and then afterwards, the police tried to coerce and browbeat all the witnesses into saying there hadn't been this woman in the polka dot dress. One of the women witnesses they did this to was Sandy Serrano, who was so outraged at the way she was treated that she sued, and her lawyers were able to get the official LAPD audio tape of the interrogation of Serrano by LAPD Detective Hank Hernandez, who supposedly also had intelligence connections. And it really does show you that, yes, all along, witnesses to these events are threatened, browbeat, coerced, in some cases bribed to change their testimony to conform with the official story. Sometimes they don't, and that can be a disaster. That's what happened with Ibrahim Todashev down in Florida. Refused to go along with framing the Tsarnaev brothers for a murder that they had nothing to do with and wound up being shot by the FBI. Now, over the weekend, as you know, there was another terror attack in London at the London Bridge. It involved a vehicle ramming some people and then these terrorists getting on out and stabbing a bunch of individuals. The terrorists were shot. And, of course, everybody is already out there trying to milk this latest incident, the third since March, if my count is correct, for all the political hay that they can. And already there are reasons to suspect that this was, in fact, another staged false flag attack, because at least one of these London Bridge attackers was already familiar to the anti-terror police. Same story we had with the Manchester bomber. The cops knew this guy was out there, knew he was dangerous. They were getting warnings he was going to do something. And now, over at 21st Century Wire, Kurt Nemo is saying that one of the London Bridge attackers has been linked to British intelligence. And so already this is starting to really, really stink. And even more bizarre than that, story out of the Metro in Great Britain itself. These terrorists were wearing suicide vests, and after they were shot by the police, the bomb squad moved in and discovered they were fake. They weren't. They were just costume pieces. They were not really explosive vests. They were just made to look like them, but they were. Why? It doesn't make any sense unless it's all theater. Now, needless to say, Donald Trump is out there saying that this latest terror attack only underscores that responsible controls on immigration, especially from nations whose populations do not like us, has to be allowed to move forward. And, of course, we're seeing the pro-immigration, open-border globalists are out there saying, well, it's not politically correct to try and categorize, these terrorists as all being Muslim, even though all the terrorists seem to keep being Muslim. But it is time for some common sense here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So Trump is out there saying, as president, I will do what is necessary to prevent this threat from spreading to our shores and work every single day to protect the safety and security. Now, if it's a false flag, it's going to happen no matter what security you have there. And it does appear to be a false flag. We're not really sure why. Now, Theresa May has been dropping rapidly in the polls. We're coming up on the snap general election, and maybe she thinks that wagging the terror card is going to boost her poll numbers again. But I think the message is going on out, especially when you listen to the comment made by London's mayor. This is the new normal. Get used to it. You live in this wonderful city, but there are going to be terror attacks. You might as well just get used to dealing with that. That seems to be the idea. Now, one agenda that Theresa May is really pushing as hard on the basis of this latest terror attack is more government control over the Internet, more surveillance. She wants to have a whole new Internet that will be controllable and regulated by the government so that they can prevent this online radicalization. Well, there was radicalization long before there was an Internet. And I don't know who's doing your intelligence planning, but if you shut down the Internet, the radicalization is going to continue using pamphlets. Small little pamphlets like this one. This is a very radical pamphlet here. It's basically the text of the Constitution of the United States of America. And people will just hand them to each other, out of sight of the government surveillance. So this is a case of not thinking very clearly, because if the radicalization is in fact actually taking place on the Internet, and I haven't seen a lot of it, then you want it to stay there so you can follow it and track it. If you shut down the Internet, people are going to go back to printing presses and little brochures, and it's going to be a lot harder to find out what's going on out there. But again, the real agenda is all these governments around the world are realizing they have lost the ability to lie to their populations with impunity. And without the ability to cheat and lie and deceive, they really can't control their populations. Trick them into doing things that the people don't want to do, like more wars, higher taxes, sending their children off to the battlegrounds and so forth here. And a lot of people are already criticizing Theresa May, saying that her call for more government control of the Internet is misleading and misguided for reasons that I have already elucidated here. And in fact, they're describing her as intellectually lazy. It's a knee-jerk reaction. Ooh, terror happened, well, let's control the Internet. And common sense is going to tell you real criminals and real terrorists already know not to communicate over the Internet, over social media, over any, because it is all monitored. They're going to have little private means of communication that are not subject to the monitoring of the government. The government just wants to watch us all because they're getting really, really nervous that we are waking up. We refuse to go back to sleep, and they're understandably concerned. So anyway, just coming up on the election, Theresa May is out there saying they have to have wider surveillance, and Great Britain is already one of the most intensely surveilled countries on earth. Highest per capita concentration of surveillance cameras in the street. They have that new Snoopers charter where everybody's browsing history and email gets saved for an entire year in case they have to go back and look something. And it is a little hypocritical because earlier in her political career, she campaigned against more government surveillance. So basically, Theresa May is out there trying to shift the blame for the failure to stop this attack onto the Internet. Not willing to go there that maybe tighter border controls might happen if the attack was genuine, which more and more we're beginning to see this does look like it was a false flag. And again, more and more of Europe's leaders and the world leaders are realizing this open border idea hasn't worked out. Over in Poland, their prime minister had a recent speech and he just said, we will not take part in this madness. We will never agree to it. And Poland and a couple of the other member states of the European Union are being threatened with massive financial penalties from Brussels if they dare actually start controlling their borders. So Trump is back out there on Twitter calling for the courts to allow his travel ban to proceed, saying that we need to be smart, vigilant, and tough, and he's absolutely correct. All righty, we're going to take a phone call. Mike in Alaska, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Mike. I just wanted to bring to your attention some of the things about the immigration to Europe that people sometimes overlook. The first time I heard this, I was shocked. But if you look at the levels of inbreeding in North Africa and the Middle East, and then you look at the average national IQ, it explains a lot. It explains a lot about why it's so violent, why they would sort of, how a religion like that, or a cult, if you'd like, developed, and why it's always violent, and the stabbing.
Well, hang on. You're painting with a little bit of a wide brush here. First of all, I think much of the violence is cultural rather than inbreeding. It is the way that they're being raised, and their particular religion is not the issue, because good people are going to do good things, bad people will do bad things. Both will cite religion as their reason. If they're raised in a culture of violence, from the extreme hardships they grow up in, then yes, when they get to Europe and they're not getting all the free stuff they were promised, they're going to act out. And as I've said many, many times before, migration is a filtering process. You're not getting the best of the people from those source countries. The people who are successful, who are doing well, they're going to stay where they are. They don't want to leave their home. So you're getting this filter where what you're really getting on the other end of that migration pipeline going into Europe, you're getting people who couldn't make it in their own country. You're getting people who are fleeing prosecution. You're getting people who are carrying contagious diseases. The migration process is selected, and it is biased toward that criminal element in the home country.
I agree with you, Mike, but one thing is when you look at, for example, Syria, and we know a lot of these people are not coming from there, but some of them are. You look at the average IQ being 75, and IQ is a bell curve distribution. The average in most European countries is about 100. So they're 2 to 3 standard deviations away from the average person in, let's say, Germany. Why is this important? It's important because when they get there, even if they're not violent, all they'll be able to do is chop meat or make a kebab or drive a taxi, the lowest level stuff, which is not in demand right now.
Yes.
So they get there and then they can't get a job. They can't become a NASA scientist. They can't get a BMW, so they get angry. It kind of makes sense, and that's not even a religion part.
Yeah, but let us point out that back home in Syria, the other side of that bell curve, the people with IQs of 120, 130, they're the ones who are going to stay where they are because they have become successful. I don't want to be coming on out here and saying that all Syrians have lower IQ than anybody else. As you say, it's a distribution, but again, that is part of that filtration. We're not getting the best representatives from those source countries.
Exactly, and the ones that are very higher IQ, because yes, it's a curve. It's not everyone is on one side of it. It's evenly distributed, but some of the higher end ones may have came in the 80s or the 70s, and they were not only heretical in the religious sense that they didn't want to blow anyone up, or they just wanted to get along and realize that dream of living in the West, but they came earlier, and there was a brain drain. Again, like you said, there's others that have the money inside of those countries. Why would they leave?
Yes.
But if you move 5 million at one point, you're going to get a bunch of people that, even if they're not religiously violent, will not make it as far as what the economies of Europe demand. As far as, we're discovering that 50% of them cannot read and write in their own language. So we're this is by design. It's not accidental. And but
I'm going to disagree with that. I'm going to disagree with that. The agenda was open borders and blurring cultural distinctions for the New World Order, but I don't think they really thought it all the way through to say what's really going to happen when we have this migration process going. What sort of individuals are going to be taking part in the migration? How are they going to interact with the people in Europe? One of the big problems, regardless of IQ, regardless of training, regardless of background, is that the economies of the European member states were struggling just to take care of their own people. And now all of a sudden we have these millions and millions of new people who are coming on in who are placing a tremendous strain on the social system. it really was not thought all the way through. I guess when they get together at like the Bilderbergers or whatever, and the wine and whiskey is flowing, and they just come up with a really good idea. Let's just blur everything together and it'll be fine. All right, we're off to the tennis courts. But it clearly was not thought all the way through. I don't think the upheaval and the backlash and the violence was actually part of the plan. I think they were simply oblivious to this being a possibility when they take two obviously disparate cultures and forcibly clash them together.
I agree. They didn't expect the internet to be there so that the information could get out. They didn't expect it to be such a large clash at such a quick period of time. I mean, they may know that we're headed they may head us down a crazy path, but they don't know all the variables there. But Mike, I wanted to ask you, do you think that anything that's going on now in the news is happening to distract us from that meeting, because they're receiving more attention at Virginia, the Bilderbergers, than they ever have in the past?
Well, they are. People are sort of looking for who's actually calling the shots in these various governments. I know a lot of people were very concerned that Trump sent some representatives. I'm frankly, given his past record, I'm surprised Alex Jones didn't show up this year, because normally he loves to go to wherever the Bilderbergers are, and it's here in Virginia. It's not like it's that long a plane flight. But again, we know that there is a power behind the power we are allowed to see, and now it's becoming very, very visible. So we're generating more attention about them. They're still trying to be as secretive as they always have been. They've come out with a couple of public announcements, which I wouldn't put too much faith in or trust in that this is what's really going on. But we do know they're concerned about Trump being a loose cannon on their deck. We know that they're very, very concerned over the erosion of faith, belief, and trust by the general population in their respective governments. That is a major problem, not just for the governments as they are today, but for that looming new world order. You literally are not going to be able to start a global government when the entire population of the globe thinks it's a scam.
That's right. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha, Brendan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I was just calling to see if you saw that CNN staged memorial where they had hijab-wearing women with graphic signage and C-stands, LED lights, directors, chairs, coffee.
Yeah, I saw that.
Total production by CNN.
Yeah, I saw that.
Come on.
Yeah.
How outrageous. I mean, this should be a criminal act.
Well, you know, stop watching CNN is the obvious answer here. You know it's all going to be fake. And again, CNN's numbers are down along with the rest of the corporate media. Everybody's coming on over here to the independent media because they want to find out what's actually really going on. All right, Brendan, got to let you go. We got to take a break here for some commercials so we can pay some bills around here, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're just now getting word. The United States Supreme Court has now set a deadline of June 12th for the challengers of President Donald Trump's travel ban. They have to file their responses by June 12th. After that, the Supreme Court's going to go ahead and they're going to have a final decision on this. And if we had a justice system that actually went along with the letter of the law, this would have never even gotten this far. Title 8 makes it very clear. The nation does have a right to control who comes across the borders, and the president does have a right to issue proclamations banning certain groups, and other presidents have used it in the past. They're only making a big stink about it now because this is a major threat to the New World Order, the globalist design of erasing our cultural differences by having people of different cultures rape and kill each other. I guess that's the plan here. Okay, let's see. Karen in Maryland. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, hi there. I have two questions if you're prepared to answer them. Are you well enough versed about a cashless society to be able to discuss it?
Well, I've discussed it in the past before, mostly in terms of its obvious shortcomings for ordinary people, its advantages to the banking industry, And as we had last week demonstrated, the potential for a failure of the computer systems to leave many people simply unable to purchase food, even though technically they have money in their bank accounts.
Okay, well, my question is, it's okay if you don't know how to answer this, but my question is, in a cashless, and I don't even know if this is available in Hawaii because it's not available in all states, but what happens to the lottery, the state lottery, in a cashless society? Because many states require cash for lottery tickets. So what would happen to the lottery?
Well, they would have to make some kind of an allowance. I mean, the whole point of the cashless society, you have that little plastic card where you cannot spend money that you do not have. And so I don't think there would be that significant an effect on the state lotteries.
Okay, and then question number 2, completely different subject, is about the oath of office that the military and the elected officials take. To your knowledge, are there any government agencies that have employees that simply do not take an oath of office, but it is assumed that they do?
I actually do not know how to answer that question. I think the problem is less whether there's an oath of office and more a question of whether people who take the oath actually have any intention of abiding by it. And that really does seem to be the issue. The public taking of an oath in full view of the press cameras is supposed to reassure us all that the system is playing by the rules. Obviously, recent events to the contrary show us that, no, it's just part of the window dressing. I've taken an oath of office. You can trust me that I'm doing good things. No. Sorry, it doesn't work that way.
Okay, well, I mean, it would be a partial explanation as to, stories and reality, if not everybody who it was thought that they took an oath actually took one. So anyway.
Well, the issue goes way beyond violation of an oath. Many of these rogue intelligence agencies are openly violating the law and the Constitution. And we have seen, going back for more than a few administrations, this almost openly displayed contempt for the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. This idea that this may have worked 200 years ago, but obviously if we're going to run this nation the way we think it should be run, we have to get rid of that silly Second Amendment and Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment and just get rid of all 10 of them, seems to be the attitude.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All
Great
right.
show as usual.
Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Now, as you know, this week, former FBI Director James Comey is going to testify before the Senate Intelligence Committee. It is strongly rumored that he's going to go on out there and try and claim President Trump tried to interfere with the investigation into Michael Flynn, even though Comey himself, 2 months after this supposedly happened, testified under oath before the Senate committee that there had been no political interference whatsoever. So, more about this when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're going to grab a couple more phone calls, then we're going to close the phone lines for a bit, get some news out here. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, just to follow up, your last caller had a great question, and she should call into John's show tonight. Ron McDonald's going to be on, and Ron and I have sat down and talked about this question that she asked, she posed to you, and legitimacy in the oath of office. And most times, Ron will tell you that the office, there was not the oath taken, at least correctly, appropriately. And that's kind of where he starts, at the roots level of, did the person actually take the oath? Did they have the authorization? So if she's still listening, I would ask her to call into Ron McDonald Day on John Stadmiller's show and ask that question, because he can go more into depth on that answer, that question.
Okay, well, hopefully she's still listening, and she will do the call-in. Now, obviously, if somebody does take an oath, and they go through that whole formal ceremony, it is actually legally binding, just like when you take an oath to tell the truth in a court of law. And if you take an oath and you violate that oath, technically you could actually be prosecuted. Unfortunately, as far as politicians are concerned, it's never enforced. And most politicians are now taking the position that lying to people is protected speech under the First Amendment. When the independent media tells the truth, oh, that's hate speech, that's anti-Semitism, that's this, that's that. But when politicians lie to you, the voter, that's protected speech under the First Amendment. That tells you just how twisted and Alice through the looking glass our society has become.
I agree. Hey, one quick question for you, Mike, is how do you, in a court of law, I have never seen it, maybe you've seen it, but how do they swear in somebody that is an atheist? And they use the "so help you God." How do they do that?
You use the expression, "I do so affirm."
Question.
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot. We're going to switch over to Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I do so affirm my government's corrupt.
Yes. I second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Hey, I felt the ground shake.
Hey, Mike, did you hear about one of the London Bridge attackers that was in a documentary about British jihad? Now, wasn't there years ago also one of these jihadis that was in a documentary also in Britain, I believe? So it's a rolling theme, you know. I mean, I don't know if this was a false flag or not. You know, that's up for debate. But there is a chicken coming home to roost moment with arming, funding these people, and you're looking at, like, you know, we've been talking about this for a while, the decline of Western, you know, power. Because I wanted to talk about the Saudi, Qatari. That now, like, is this another nail in the coffin for, like, the Marshall Plan, Bretton Woods type of thing, do you think?
I think it is. Somebody has botched this horribly because they were trying to hold the Middle East together as a unit in the Western sphere of influence, and now all of a sudden Qatar is just spinning off. Everybody is making stink face at them. They're talking about pulling out the U.S. base. All of which is just going to encourage Qatar to move closer to Iran, closer to Russia, and closer to China. And so this is a major foreign policy whoopsie.
So that means I shouldn't buy stock in the Saudi-Qatari pipeline, huh?
Probably not. You'll just have those Dakota Access Pipeline people all over your case anyway.
Yeah, I mean, let me tell everybody, if they don't know, Qatar has I think a vast amount of natural gas, I believe, right?
Yes, they do.
There you go. All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to close the phone lines for a little bit, probably open them up more toward the top of the hour here, but I do want to get into some of these stories. So we were talking about the fact that former FBI Director James Comey is going to be testifying before the Senate Intelligence Committee. It's going to happen this Thursday. The rumor is he's going to try and accuse Donald Trump of interfering in the investigation into former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. And yet, again, along with so many other documented lies coming from James Comey, he testified under oath 2 months after this supposedly happened that there had been no political interference in any of the FBI's investigation. And, of course, the other issue is there are normal procedures for dealing with this sort of thing. If Trump had actually asked him to haul off the investigation, that's obstruction of justice, and James Comey was obligated to report it at the time it happened, not wait until months later after he's been fired, and he's obviously got an axe to grind there, and they just say, oh, I've got a little Post-it note that said, all the way back here, Trump was doing this. And the reality is that James Comey is going before this hearing with serious credibility issues. And, of course, the corporate media that is out to get Trump, they're going to take everything Comey says and present it as the absolute unassailable gospel truth. You will believe this. But I certainly won't. Now, a little bit of good news is the White House has come on out and said that President Trump is not going to invoke executive privilege to block Comey from testifying. This was a big old bear trap they were trying to set for him where he's going to say, yeah, we know Comey's going to lie, just tell him that he can't talk at all. But had he done that, of course, the corporate media would say, aha, there's a cover-up there. And so Trump has dodged that particular trap. But again, I'm sure that Trump's enemies in the corporate media and within the government, they're going to take every word that Comey says and proclaim it absolute truth, even though there's no evidence to support it. Comey didn't get it on tape. This is just his recollection from months ago. It's a very, very weak case. Now, interestingly enough, over at Newsmax Video and 12160, apparently more and more high-ranking U.S. government officials are confirming that this surveillance on the Trump campaign, Trump himself, his family and associates, went on long, long before they actually tried to obtain that visa warrant. So there's the real scandal. Obamagate. President Obama was misusing the intelligence resources of the United States government to spy on Donald Trump, clearly for political purposes. Now, supposedly, NSA Director Mike Rogers is warning he's going to drop a bomb on Trump during his testimony on Wednesday. So they're gearing up for the attack. They're gearing up for the attack that, Donald Trump has done all these terrible things. We've got to impeach him. We've got to 25th Amendment him. And it is very, very obvious we're seeing a government that is almost too factionalized to function any longer. And again, it is a strong parallel to what we were seeing in the former Soviet Union in the months before it all fell apart. It is very important for a government to maintain at least a public image of unity and cooperation to reassure the voters and taxpayers that everything's working the way it's supposed to. When you see one portion of the government, when you see one portion of the government just openly at war with the president, that's rattling a lot of people. I've been talking to a lot of people around here. They're literally saying it doesn't look like the government is even functioning correctly anymore, which, yes, it isn't, very clearly. Everybody in that government right now is just dealing with their own personal agenda, their own personal fortune. They're not really doing their job. Just out there lining their pockets as quickly as possible. Now, over this last weekend, actually end of last week, Megyn Kelly, who's coming back to the airwaves, managed to secure an interview with Vladimir Putin, and she went on in there with this gorgeous dress with the high slit. Apparently she was trying to get Putin flustered, which didn't work. And Megyn really did not get what she wanted to get. She was out there trying to say about, Putin's relationship with Mr. Flynn, and Putin turned around and said, well, I've worked much more with you just in the last few days on this interview than I ever worked with Mr. Flynn. So if I have a relationship with anybody in the U.S., it's certainly more with you than with Mr. Flynn. Putin went on to slam the very creative corporate media in the United States, saying that their private lives must be incredibly boring. Now, there is a new development. Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley has launched a new investigation of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's effort to thwart a Bangladesh government corruption probe. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton just had her finger in everybody's problems all over the globe here. Now, there was apparently this raid that went to the 7200 block of Jonathan Street and took a bunch of documents. All they're saying is it's something about national security. And everybody's kind of up and saying, ooh, what's going on? Well, it turns out this place is listed as a subsidiary of the Journal of Muslim Minority Affairs, which is a business that employs Huma Abedin's brother and sister. And prior to signing on with Hillary Clinton, Huma also worked for this in the past. And all the officials are saying it's a matter of national security. And there's a lot of speculation on out there, and there's a lot of deliberate disinformation. But there are two issues. Were there additional emails there? One of Hillary's missing laptops, a thumb drive? And the timing of this raid opens up a possibility. As you know, former Congressman Anthony Weiner pled guilty last month to transferring obscene content to a minor, and he's going to serve 21 to 27 months in prison on a plea deal. The question is, did the plea deal include giving up evidence on Hillary Clinton, and was that evidence stored at the Jonathan Street residence? So we're going to be keeping a very, very close idea on that. Hillary is still out there on her denial tour, and I don't know if she actually still thinks there's a chance she's going to be anointed president of the White House, or we're seeing Hillary just as a crazy old lady who's in the middle of a self-destruct. But now she's out there, Donald Trump colluded with 1,000 Russian agents. Would you believe it? 1,000 Russian agents to infiltrate social media and engineer a campaign of lies about her. We didn't need to do that. All we needed to do was tell the truth. And that's what worked. Now she's out there saying, there were Americans who were out to get me. There were Americans who didn't want her to be president. There are Americans who didn't like her or her policies. And there are Americans who were very, very, very concerned about the past criminal record of the Clinton cartel. Now, a little bit of good news. Everyone was talking about Trey Gowdy. Would he be head of the FBI? And at one point he was interested and at the top of the list, and then came on back and said, well, no, not really. Turns out he is heading for a place where he's actually going to be far more influential. Apparently Trey Gowdy will be the new chair of the powerful House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. Apparently he didn't even run for the position, but the other members of the House, looking at how well he has done, chairing these investigations into the Obama White House scandals, including Benghazi and Fast and Furious and the rest of it, they said, this is the guy who's got to do it. And he is the guy who can do it. So at this point, everybody is saying it's pretty much a done deal. Now, we keep hearing rumors about a staff shakeup at the White House. And that includes the White House Chief of Staff, former RNC Chairman Reince Priebus. But the reason he's still there is apparently they can't find anybody who wants to take the job over from him. I'm finding that very surprising. It is a very powerful, influential job. It's the most powerful job in the White House, second only to the President himself, because the Chief of Staff controls the information going to the President, and what gets tossed out is junk. But, you know, if anybody from the Trump White House is listening to this show, if you're really desperate, I've got some spare time on my hand. As a patriotic American citizen, I would be willing to step on in and be the White House Chief of Staff. Getting into the war zones here, the founder of Blackwater, Eric Prince, is now out there saying that Afghanistan can only be calmed down, stabilized, by having a permanent American manager over the country. Forget about trying to create a puppet regime. It hasn't really worked on that. He's literally calling for a return to colonialism and the appointment of an American viceroy to rule over Afghanistan. This is a major step backward in human civilization. But then it does seem that a lot of the world's top money junkies really do long for that simpler time of colonialism and you know, a dumbed down population. Things were so much simpler then. We've just let it get totally out of control here. We need to go back to the 1950s, or even the 1850s. That would be. Now let's talk about Qatar, because this is getting chaotic. Apparently the other nations in the Middle East are already cutting diplomatic ties to Qatar over its relations with Iran and support of certain Islamist groups. And so they're trying to isolate the tiny energy-rich country by cutting off its land, sea, and air routes to the outside world. In other words, they're blockading it. Now, we're already getting word of panic buying in Qatar. People are going to the supermarkets, they are emptying the shelves, they're taking it home and just putting it in the closet. They don't want to be caught with a broken supply chain. But Iran is actually saying this was all triggered by Trump's visit to Saudi Arabia. Now, Tillerson is out there saying it's time for everybody to kiss and make up. Solve your differences with Qatar, because, again, if Qatar breaks off from the rest of the Middle East, where are they going to go? The only place they can go is an alliance with Iran, Russia, and China. This has been a major foreign policy goof. Dennis Ross is out there saying that this may result in the U.S. pulling its fleet from Qatar. So that is definitely out of control here. Now, let's get on to... actually, we're coming up here on a break. We're going to take a few moments for commercials, and we'll be back talking about Syria. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about the war zones. And over in Syria, the Syrian forces are ignoring the threats coming from Washington, D.C., not to march on the U.S.-backed terrorists, militants, jihadis, whatever name they're using this week. And apparently the Syrian army managed to advance 1,400 square kilometers in the Badia region east of Palmyra over the last 24 hours. The military operations are still going on. Apparently the Syrian army also captured the key town of Maskana yesterday, and that was the last ISIS stronghold in Aleppo. So they're making tremendous gains over there. At this point, as they focus in on Mosul, Syria is basically sending out a very simple message to the militants there. Surrender or die. Apparently, Assad's amnesty program is no longer considered valid. And it looks like they're pushing through to regain these major areas. Now, if you look on a map of Syria, it still shows all kinds of portions of Syria that are still under the control of ISIS. But if you actually look on a topographic map, you're talking about empty desert. Wars are won not over the volume of territory you are controlling, but the key infrastructure points, key highways, rail lines, the hubs where everything transits. And Syria is definitely taking back control of that. Iraq's Hashdi has retaken an important area on the Syrian border, taking that back from Daesh. Meanwhile, over in Korea, the rhetoric is still getting a little bit out of control. North Korea is rejecting the UN sanctions and says it is going to keep building up its forces to defend against an eventual invasion, which is what happens to countries that don't have good, strong defensive forces. Sooner or later, the U.S. gobbles them up. Now, as you know, Israel is celebrating 50 years of the occupation of Palestine, going all the way back to what is called the Six-Day War. And as is usual, as we have learned through bitter experience, the reality of what went on is very much hidden behind the official story of Israel under threat from its Arab neighbors. And now, 50 years later, this is even over in The Intercept, basically saying it was all a fraud. Israel wanted to grab more territory. And so they said, oh, they're about to attack us. We have to attack them first. But we even have quotes from members of Israel's own government saying, yeah, of course it's a bluff. Of course it's a lie. And here is something that is very revealing, and this is actually in the Times of Israel. Apparently, there's been some declassified information which said that had the Six-Day War gone the other way, Israel was going to set off an atomic bomb in the Sinai as a warning to everybody else. There you have it. Israel's had nuclear weapons all along. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open again, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go to a phone call. Alex in Florida. Aloha. What is on your mind today?
Hey, Michael. I was calling to see if there's any proof that Kennedy said that he wanted to dismantle the CIA. Do you know if that was documented anywhere?
Yeah, well, he basically wrote an executive order calling for the transfer of covert military operations from CIA back to the Pentagon. But it was never implemented due to a bureaucratic resistance. And apparently, following the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy was overheard by several people saying that he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and cast it into the wind. Because he felt they'd lied to him. They'd lied to him, they'd set him up, they tried to force his hand, and that wasn't something that Kennedy or any president is going to be comfortable with.
That's right. I know that he also, there's rumors that he said that there are people in this country that want every man, woman, and child to be enslaved. Did you hear that? Have you ever heard that?
That one doesn't ring a bell. I know he was talking, there's this famous speech about secret societies and so forth. It's been a long time. I may not remember everything that I heard Kennedy say. After all, I was actually a little kid back then. Anything else, Alex?
That's it. So you're saying that he wanted to, they believe that he wanted to dismantle the CIA via like an executive order to transfer some type of what from the CIA back to the Pentagon?
Basically he wanted to transfer authority over covert military interventions from the CIA back to the Pentagon. Certainly the Pentagon would have liked that. The CIA was absolutely opposed because covert intervention is all the CIA knows how to do. They're not really very good at waging outright open field war.
That's right. Now, you asked me if there was something else, and I remember something. You have a caller every now and again, and I think it's more than one caller. They'll call and they'll say that Bernie Sanders is a socialist, and I just want to let those callers know that that's right out of Hillary Clinton's playbook. That came from Hillary Clinton. We should all be able to get Medicare. That's socialism we deserve, and I want socialism. We should all be able to get Medicare, and our kids should not have to go into debt hundreds of thousands of dollars to go get an education. The system's rigged for the bankers and the insurance companies. And if it's socialism trying to get rid of that, then we need to be socialists, just like the Germans, just like the Canadians, just like all the industrial countries of the world that provide health care for their citizens.
Well, you know, what's really interesting is many, many years ago, Vladimir Lenin predicted that when Western capitalism failed, that it would inevitably deteriorate into fascism to preserve the wealth and power of those at the top. And that has indeed happened. Now, I'd like to see this country go back to being a real capitalist society, but if I have to pick between fascism and socialism, yeah, I'm in agreement with you. Let's go socialist.
Yeah, but the thing is, even if right now, if I was to equate what I pay for my health insurance and if I had to equate that into taxes, it's probably more than if our taxes went up and everyone got free health care, and it would be a better health care system. We should be able to organize as a citizen group and say we want to buy Medicare. What's wrong with that?
Well, Medicare, of course, is tangled into retirement age and that whole system. The issue is that Obamacare was not really designed to make medical care more affordable, except for the people at the very, very bottom. Everybody else is paying far more for it. This GOP attempt at a replacement plan is just more of the same thing. The goal is not good health care, but maximizing profits to corporations who are then, in turn, very generous campaign donors during the election season. The graft and corruption is just totally out of control. All the checks and balances that used to be there to constrain Congress to concerning themselves with what was best for the nation as a whole, they're all gone. And Capitol Hill is just a single giant shopping mall for all the corrupting influences in our country. They just go on up there, wag a checkbook, and get a law that helps their business.
That is correct. It's pathetic. I would rather have socialized medicine before we have Obamacare and insurance companies in the middle of our health care. We don't need them. We don't need them. We need to get rid of them.
Remember last week we had this story. So we had this story. Somebody ran the numbers out in California and said if they adopted a single-payer system there, everybody would be covered, and it would cost a heck of a lot less than Obamacare or the proposed GOP replacement. But again, everything coming out of Washington, D.C. is about finding ways to take more money away from the American people and give it to their corporate masters. The problem with that theory is we, the American people, are pretty much broke and busted. We're having trouble just making our monthly bills. There's nothing left out here to loot and plunder. And that's probably why they're running around in circles trying to figure what else they're going to do now. Well, let's invade another country and steal their money to make our bankers happy. Anyway, Alex, we're going to let you go. We're going to take a quick second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining our network, and we're going to go to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike. Hey, how you doing, Mike?
I'm
Mike,
doing...
a couple of things. Okay. You talked about Syria before. I was off today, so I decided to have a little fun. I listened to some talk shows that normally, maybe listen on and off for a few minutes or so. I listened to them today, and I made some calls. One was to Breitbart, and I reminded them that they hadn't covered, that they were refusing to cover the Seth-Rich PNC murder, and they were refusing to cover the Aiea case, and by their own former reporter, Lee Stranahan, they stopped him from covering the CrowdStrike scandal, and they actually fired him over it when he insisted on covering it. And then I went to David Webb, who was on Sirius XM.
Yeah.
And I called him about. I first called him about the climate business. That I supported Trump and that, but I told him what I don't support about Trump was his attack on Syria, and the fact due to that false flag attack by the terrorists and all that with the poison gas. Before I can go any further, he says, "Look, I'm not going to listen to this tinfoil hat nonsense. We all know it was, he said it was Assad. He said it goes along with the intelligence officials. The same intelligence officials are lying their asses off every day now about Trump and all that, about the Russia thing." And he says, I'm not going to entertain this tinfoil hat stuff. So what I would suggest is all patriots, all these talk shows, not only these two I mentioned, and it was another one too, Laura Ingraham today. She's normally fairly good. She said that she was talking about the interview that Megyn Kelly had with Putin, and she said that I couldn't get through to her, by the way. The call screener wouldn't let me through. I should have lied to the call screener. I probably could have gotten through. But she said the fact of the matter is Russia has no free press themselves, and they are very, and they don't allow women to be reporters and all that. And I called to make it clear there was an out-and-out either lie or she doesn't know what she's talking about, because RT is one of the finest, to me, one of the finest news sites in the world today. You get more information there, way more than our mainstream media. And on top of that, a lot of their reporters are women. A lot of their best reporters, like Maria Finishina, I think her name is,
yeah.
She's hot. She's just as hot as Megyn Kelly, I think hotter, but she's got a brain on top of it. And there's others on RT too, including the one that always goes and questions at the State Department. I can't quite pronounce her name. It's also a Russian name and all that. So I mean, he's out and out lying about that stuff. And you see the Russian reporters going right to the front line in the Syrian battles and all that. They risk their lives, and as well as they don't have free press there. So, I mean, it's about time, I think, people start going to these talk shows who try to make believe they're really alternate media. They're not alternate media. You're alternate media. Alex Jones is alternate media. John B. Wells is alternate media. There's a whole bunch of others. Lionel is alternate media. But these about time, I think, that people start challenging these talk shows. They think they're so high and mighty. They think they really, they all think they're so, that they're giving the real so-called conservative message. It's not a conservative message. It's a neocon message, especially when it comes to foreign policy. And the neocons are what I call genetically modified GMO version of politics. They're like combined Nazis, communists, fascists, and a bunch of other imperialists, into one philosophy that's dangerous and unfortunately has infiltrated our system very badly, you know?
Yeah,
So,
very much. Well, it maybe was there all along. It's just now it's become visible. You know, once they launched with the Project for the New American Century, when you start talking about the United States becoming the world's global superpower and throwing its weight around, it's kind of hard to keep that under wraps. But you're absolutely right. It's time for people to start calling into these shows and saying, you know, this idea that Assad gassed his own people, it didn't make any sense. Okay, Seth Rich, there's no evidence that Seth Rich was robbed. It was a hit. It was an absolute hit. And yeah, what we have to do is shatter their confidence. I'm sure a lot of these people are leading very cloistered lives. They don't want to look at the independent media. They want to get up from you know, in the morning, go into the corporate media studios, read the teleprompter, and just convince themselves that they are still in control of the minds of America. And what is needed is an ice bucket challenge to the corporate media saying, no, we don't believe you anymore. I would not be surprised to find out that these talking heads on the corporate media are not being shown the latest polls about the loss of public confidence and trust in the corporate media.
Well, what I noticed about Breitbart is they've really cleaned house. I mean, they've gotten rid of some of their best people, like I just mentioned. Lee Strand, of course, you know, Bannon is no longer, well, Bannon is in the White House himself, and others, and they're using these airheads, these that have no clue what's really going on. You can tell they don't even know how to conduct a talk show, and this is the people they put on. There's one guy that's pretty good. That's Raheem Hassan. That he's an English guy, British guy. He's very good. But other than that, they've got a bunch of idiots, and they got rid of their best reporter, Lee Stranahan, who's all over YouTube, by the way. Excellent. And you know who he works for now? He works for Russian news. He works for Sputnik.
Yes.
He's got a radio show on Sputnik. And, you know, I mentioned that, too, to Breitbart, and they weren't very happy about that either. I says, you know, he got a better job than working for you. He works for I said,
well, okay, let's wrap this up here because we're going on for way too long here. But the point is that the people who are afraid of the truth getting on out there are trying to acquire or infiltrate or otherwise co-opt the independent media everywhere that they can. And when you have a large operation like Breitbart, they're basically they're in need of investment capital, and with that investment capital often comes a lot of very covert control. And so the smaller an independent media outlet is, the more likely you're going to be getting unconstrained, unfiltered, uncensored information. And again, a lot of people have pointed out here at Republic Broadcasting, the different hosts have very different points of view, and that's the way it is supposed to be. To present a diversity of opinion so that you can listen to all of the various presenters and decide for yourself what it is that makes sense. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Well, the good thing about Alex Jones is he's got mostly his own products that he sells, and he's able to pretty much fund InfoWars with that. And he's not perfect, but he's about as still as, and I know you guys have your disagreements, but he's still about as good as it gets because he will give you the truth. Oh, by the way, and that guy David West accused me. He says, "Why don't you go listen to Alex Jones if you want to believe that kind of stuff?" You know. So I tried to tell him Alex Jones got probably 10 times the amount of listeners that you got, but I wasn't able to get. You know, by that time he hung up. You know,
okay.
So this is the way these people think. They just you know, they're just arrogant, and they're becoming just like the mainstream media. They say they don't want to be like, or they criticize all the time. They become very little different.
Well, their stardom's getting to their head, but we've seen some of the independent media outlets very obviously being cornered, threatened, bribed. They're trying to buy it all up the way they did the corporate media. There's simply too many of us out here, and that is really why it is falling apart. Anyway, Mark, I got to let you go. And let's take Kathy in Massachusetts. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, it's Kathy from Massachusetts, but I'm currently in Missouri, but I say they know me, you know, because I'm from Massachusetts. Bottom line, Medicare. I wasn't in the system at all when I was in Boston working, when I stress fractured the foot, pounding the pavement, you know, all this work and standing on my feet. So when I couldn't walk home from work one night because I'd been taping it like a marathon runner for a year and a half. It just had to be operated on. I ended up on, I'd never been in this system before, so I was like, oh my God. So I ended up on Medicaid in Massachusetts, which is the safest safety net in the nation. Mm-hmm. And I was able to see, the guy who did, Nuriev's Achilles rupture to do this sesamoid resuture, okay? If I was so I had to be on Medicaid for 2 years before I could transfer that to another state once I was on the disability. And so after the 2 years was up, I couldn't afford to live in Boston, so I said, I got to get out of here. So I went to Dallas, and I was ignorant. I had no idea. None of my good doctors that I had seen, when I had the corporate coverage, none of them had ever taken Medicare, ever. And I went to see someone to help advocate, and they didn't believe me that I couldn't get an appointment on Medicare. They said, no way, maybe Medicaid, but not Medicare. And I said, no, try it. So in Massachusetts, I was able to see the top dog to do my sesamoid resuture on Medicaid. And in Dallas, I couldn't find any specialist that would take Medicare. And so this provider didn't believe me. So they picked up the phone, called the doctor's office, and they said, no, sir, we don't take any new patients on Medicare. We're allowing the ones we have already to age out, but we are not accepting any new Medicare patients. So Medicare is not the answer. And that, I'm just saying, if you're planning on...
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we're coming up on a commercial break here, and we don't need all the fine details about your medical adventure. But certainly, the complexity of the system is a big problem. That there are all these different programs, and you go over here and you go over there, and it really does need a drastic simplification. But again, one of the reasons it becomes as obfuscated as it is to make it very difficult to find out how much it's really costing you, how much benefit you're actually getting, and there seems to be indications that the medical industrial complex is just as corrupt and avaricious as any of these other large corporate clusters that are surviving by plundering on the people. And Claire and I have to go through our insurance. There was a gap between my last policy and my start of Medicare, and I had to get a temp policy for that, and it was just all this complexity, and it really should just be a very, very simple system. Simple is better, simple is lower cost, but also simpler is easy to understand. And apparently the last thing anybody in the medical industrial complex wants is for ordinary people to be able to understand why their money is being taken, why things are so expensive, why the actual medical care is not all that good, why so many of the products we're being told that we have to take are turning out to be dangerous now. So
I shared the details. I shared the details simply because if anyone's planning a move, they want to make sure that where they're going, they can find a doctor that will accept Medicare. Because where I am in Missouri, I can locate an endocrinologist that will accept it. If you can even find one in some major cities, you're waiting a year even to see one. So that's part of why I went into the detail, is it does vary state to state significantly. And just to be wise, because I didn't know that. I would never have moved there had I known I wouldn't be able to ascertain care.
All right, well, that's a good warning for everybody. We're going to have to let you go. We're coming up on a commercial break. Thank you, Kathy. We're going to let you go. It's all out of control. It's all fragmented, and it is a mess. It is a mess. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, turning over to the Philippines, which is not getting a lot of coverage in the American corporate media, there is all of a sudden this massive ISIS army that has just come out of nowhere that is causing havoc all over the country. As you know, there was that attack at the Manila casino, which the government of the Philippines is saying was actually a botched robbery. It was not a terror attack. President Duterte is vowing to crack down on the terrorists, and apparently civilians are having to be evacuated from some of the areas where the battles are going on. So is this another regime change to punish Duterte for having a hard line against the drug trade? Because we know how much our CIA loves the drug trade. They think it's great. They think it's wonderful. All right, let's talk about the economic news. Spain's banks, they're in another crisis. And of course, when you're underneath a private central bank that loans all the currency into circulation at interest, There will always be crisis after crisis after crisis, and all they do to solve the crisis is just create more new money loaned into circulation at interest to try and paper it over and push the crisis down the road. But eventually you get back to that crisis again. Now they're talking that Spain may actually test the European Union's bail-in law, and that is going to rattle a lot of people if that actually happens. Citigroup has agreed to a $97.4 million settlement in a money laundering inquiry. Are there any bankers anywhere who are not up to their neck in all of this corruption? Sure, I'd like to find one. Very alarming story. This is out of Investment Watch blog, and it's pointing out that we are in a stage of investment in this country where investors are taking huge amounts of risk in exchange for very little potential return. Now, that's normally not considered a wise investment strategy. You want to minimize your risk and maximize your potential return, but there are no investment opportunities out there that are offering that. So investors, in order to keep keep their portfolios going, they are engaging in greater and greater amounts of risk into projects and endeavors that aren't really promising that much potential return. We're certainly seeing that in cases like Uber and their recent very disappointing numbers, the disappointing retail. And above it all, of course, we still have the U.S. government and the corporate media screaming about how the unemployment rate is incredibly low, and we know they are lying about that. And apparently the number of working-age Americans who do not have a job in this country has now topped 100 million. Another story out of Investment Watch blog, over 1,000 stores closed in a single week across the United States. And here's where it gets a little bit more alarming. Story out of SGT Report. Every time the government comes on out and says there are so many jobs being created, they're not actually going on out and finding out who is hiring. The numbers are estimates from what is called the birth-death model. And apparently, according to a research report from Morningside Hill Capital, shows that 93% of the jobs supposedly created since 2008 were birth-death model estimates and didn't actually exist. It was just a number that they wanted to put out there to reassure you everything is all hunky-dory. There's no reason to be concerned. Everything's going to be just fine. It's back to that idea that we, the American people, are the most lied to people on the face of planet Earth. All right, we're going to grab a real quick phone call here. Antonio in Tucson, what is on your mind?
I just want to promote my channel. It's called Toto the Cameraman, and I want people to subscribe to me. And
okay, well that's kind of like not fair to come. Okay, thank you. We're going to let you go here. I mean, that's just kind of tacky, calling into a show and trying to promote your own channel and get people to subscribe and everything. If you want to advertise on RBN, you can advertise on RBN or you can advertise on whatreallyhappened.com. But just trying to get yourself a free plug, that's tacky. That's very tacky. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And last week we mentioned this very strange announcement that had come out in the corporate media on how credit scores were going up for all Americans, and it was a sign the recession was over, the recovery is on, and people can start borrowing again because their credit scores are going up. And I expressed some doubt about that, and I wondered if something else was going on to artificially inflate credit scores, and as it turns out, there is. Apparently, according to another story over at Investment Watch blog, credit firms, as of the 1st of July, are no longer including certain negative elements in your individual credit report. They're just throwing them out, including apparently tax liens. And this was done specifically to make everybody's credit score higher in the hope that it will boost the economy by everybody going on out and buying a bunch of stuff. This is just subprime repackaged. Because the fact that everybody's credit score has gone up doesn't mean these people are all of a sudden able to repay the loans they're going to take out. Most Americans do not want to borrow anymore. They're trying to get out of debt. What Americans want are high-paying jobs that they can build a life on. Build for their future, build for their children, build for their retirement. But we are all held slave to a banking system that can only perpetuate by the creation and imposition of more debt upon the people. It's a pyramid scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme. And they didn't want to use the phrase subprime any longer because we had the subprime mortgages, and that created a disaster in 2008. We've got the subprime auto loans, which are going to trigger another disaster, so they can't use that anymore. Well, how do you fix that? Well, you just have everybody's credit score magically run up to where all of a sudden you must be a good credit risk. No, now is not a good time to be going any further into debt. Because we don't know for certain that we are going to be able to pay those loans off. Too many people are losing higher paying jobs and being forced to take lower paying jobs. Something like a quarter of Americans are struggling just to make their current monthly bills. Adding another bill on top of that is obviously foolish and reckless. But they're desperate to try and get you borrowing again. Use that plastic. I was over at the pharmacy the other day. They've already got all of the 4th of July regalia out there out front. Yes, it's another marketing opportunity, and they've got the bunting and the ties and the hats and the little antlers with stars on them. Nobody's even looking at the stuff. Not much enthusiasm for Independence Day around here. Story coming out of Government Slaves, Bitcoin versus gold. We've been seeing a lot of people pushing cryptocurrency, and wow, look what Bitcoin did, and it's way up there. And so this is a very common sense article saying that the problem with Bitcoin is it isn't real. It's not tangible. It's a virtual currency, and the only time you actually get something of value from it is when you sell it. And it can be manipulated, can be messed around with. Bitcoin exchanges have gone out of business. They've been hacked. And this article is basically saying metals, gold and silver, they're real the moment you buy it. The value is there in your hand. It can't be tinkered with by somebody with a computer somewhere else. So again, if you want some kind of wealth preservation, you need to be getting into the metals. Do not get the paper contracts for delivery. The brokers who sell those paper contracts are legally allowed, when the contract comes due, to make the payment to you not in the promised metal, but in more cash, more ink and paper. And now we're finding out that over the last several years, the Federal Reserve has created something like $19 trillion in instant money to prop Wall Street up. A really good way to get into metals investment is what's called the junk silver. These are the pre-1964 U.S. coins. The nickels have real nickel in them. The dimes and quarters have real silver. It is a recognized unit of value, in case you have to use them when the Federal Reserve note goes the way of the Zimbabwe $100 trillion note. Apparently, Tesla is very angry. Apparently, AAA is raising premiums on Tesla vehicles by 30% for insurance. Apparently, the owners of the Model S and the Model X cars are filing abnormally high claims. And they're saying that the car is seen as more accident-prone or more dangerous, and therefore the premiums are going to go up. Tesla is very angry because obviously this will impact sales of the Tesla. Now, I really do believe that somewhere down the road, electric vehicles are going to be the norm. If I had the money to buy buying or leasing a new car, I would definitely be looking at a Prius. I've seen the Teslas. I'm very impressed with them on the outside. Obviously, I've not had a chance to drive or evaluate one. Now, over in Great Britain, apparently they're getting ready. They're still talking about a soft Brexit. And apparently a Europhile who said that the Brexit vote made him physically sick is being lined up to lead the talks. And this apparently Ben Gummer, who campaigned vociferously for Remain, is replacing Brexit Secretary David Davis. Seems like a good way to make sure the talks go nowhere. These days, they're out there. Everything you do is being declared racist. There was this story here that just came on through from Government Slaves, where apparently Cassandra Fairbanks, who's a journalist, had to file a defamation lawsuit against Emma Roller, who writes for the pop culture website Fusion and contributes opinions to the New York Slimes. And apparently, Roller, in a tweet, accused Fairbanks of making a white power hand gesture in a photograph with journalist Mike Cernovich in the White House press briefing room. What did she consider a white power hand gesture? The OK sign. Thumb and finger together, rest of the finger spread. That is now considered a white power gesture. And so she went on now to say, see, they're racist. They're using the white power gesture. There's absolutely no indication that flashing the OK sign has anything to do with race or power. But that's how these people are thinking. No matter what anybody does, oh, it's racist, it's this, it's that, tear down the Confederate statues. Now, as you know, we're coming up next month on Independence Day. Not a lot of enthusiasm, but traditionally at the Mike Rivero, we fly our Gadsden flag. Well, now, apparently that has been declared as racist. The flags of the American Revolution are one by one being declared racist because in most cases the people who designed the flags or paid for them owned slaves. Well, I'm sorry, back then slavery was legal. A lot of people died to make it illegal. Let us remember that the purpose of the flag had nothing to do with racism. It had everything to do with independence from Great Britain. They're just stretching points any way they can to try and get rid of all the symbols of our nation. First it was the Confederacy, now they're going after the American Revolution. I'm waiting for them to go after Thomas Jefferson because he owned slaves. And we're already hearing where there are schools where the students are demanding, we demand these statues of all these people be torn down. They're trying to erase our past. Trying to create a generation with no strong sense of identity. No sense of who they are, what their history is, what their cultural roots are. Because people without a strong sense of identity are easier to control, and that's exactly what we're talking about. Now, we're still seeing all of this gnashing of teeth and wringing of hands and crying in beers over Donald Trump's pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord. Now, again, bear in mind, the Senate had not ratified it. So it was more symbolic than anything else. And everybody's out there screaming, no, no, we've got to do it. And we have all these mayors of cities who are liberals out there saying, well, we're going to abide by the Climate Accord. We're going to take money away from our people and send it to these other countries. Which I don't think is going to go over very well with their voters. Now remember, the guy who founded the Weather Channel has been out there all along saying it's a hoax. It is a hoax. I've been saying it was a hoax going all the way back to the 1990s. And right now, one of the big lies about the global warming movement is 99% of climate scientists agree on the threat of human-caused global warming. And when they made up that list, they were basically just grabbing people's names. And a lot of the people whose names are on that list have gone public saying that they were never asked for their permission. A lot of those names aren't even really scientists. They're just clerks who happen to work in the office, and they needed a name to flesh it on out. But as of right now, and this is over at fairfaxfreecitizen.com, there are 31,487 U.S. scientists, and I mean real scientists, degrees, track records, publication, peer-reviewed, including 2 Nobel Prize-winning physicists, 9,000 PhDs, saying it is a hoax. Global warming, human-caused global warming was a hoax. The human effect on climate is microscopic compared with factors like solar radiation and the shape of the Earth's orbit. And let us not forget the Climate Gate scandal that came out of the Hadley Climate Research Unit at the University of East Anglia, where somebody leaked internal emails and the source code to the computer programs used to create the hockey stick. And you can see in the computer code that they simply rigged it. It didn't matter what data they put on in, it would produce this hockey stick. It was very simple. Past a certain year, start adding numbers to the temperature. More and more each year thereafter. It was a blatant fraud. And again, I love Putin's sense of humor about this. They're actually having snow in Moscow right now. They're also having snow up in Quebec, I think. I'll be getting to that in a little bit. But Putin's out there saying, you know, we could blame the snow in June on Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. But they're not going to do that. But winter did stay very, very late this year. There's no question about it. Back in 2000, they were saying snowfalls are a thing of the past. And we've had all these record-setting winters since. Now, the carbon-Nazis are trying to recover by rebranding. They don't use global warming that much anymore. They say it's climate change, as if climate didn't always change all by itself. But they're kind of stuck because their entire agenda is to get you to pay a carbon tax. They've demonized carbon. But if the world is cooling, we need more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, not less, to trap more of the sun's heat. And, of course, carbon dioxide really isn't that strong a greenhouse gas. Even NASA's come on out and said it doesn't really behave like a glass pane. In fact, in some ways, it acts as a coolant. Water vapor is the overwhelming majority greenhouse gas in our atmosphere. But you're not going to get people to pay a cloud tax. Methane is 10 times more potent at trapping heat than carbon dioxide, but methane is produced by cows, termites, and deep crust microbes, which are life forms far too intelligent to listen to Al Gore and his nonsense. So if the world is cooling, more CO2 in the air is a good thing, according to what Al Gore has said in his documentaries. And maybe that's the reason they're pushing this. They're hoping Al Gore will have a really good box office when his film comes out later this year. All righty, we're going to grab a couple of phone calls. Jerry in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Thanks for taking my call. Hey, I got a question for you, and you mentioned something about 10 minutes ago about Bitcoin not being tangible, and I agree 100% with that, where I wanted to ask you about 5-ounce silver bars. I just recently purchased 10 of them. I don't know if that's a good investment or not.
Well, I think it is a good investment. We keep getting all these confirmations that the world's financial manipulators are still trying very hard to keep metal prices down to discourage people from closing their savings accounts or emptying their stock portfolios. But at some point, it's going to break loose. The control systems have to break down. They can't keep doing this forever. And at that point, you're going to see the prices start to increase. But again, it is a tangible asset. And as we see more and more of these global financial networks come under attack and ransomware and become very, very unreliable, having something tangible in your hand that you can trade for food or trade for a car, that's a really, really good idea.
Well, one other question I had for you is, what do you think about these breakable, they're about the size of a credit card, and they might hold 28 or 50 grams of gold, and you break off 1 gram increments. What would you think of something like that?
Well, again, you're holding the physical gold, and it is being produced in a form that makes it very easy to have a subunit that people can rely on. So that's a really good idea as well. I mean, anytime you've got a monetary system that's based on a commodity of known recognized value, it's going to be much more stable, much less subject to manipulation than these fairy tale currency notes coming out of places like the Federal Reserve and the ECB.
Okay, well, that's all I wanted to ask you. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thank you very much here. And let's see. Let's start with Lenny in Los Angeles. Lenny, what's on your mind?
Hello?
You're on the air.
Yeah. Hey, Mike, I just want to make a few points. I was listening from the beginning of the show till now and couldn't call in before now. But, you know, one point is the guy who called in was talking about IQs. In my opinion, anybody with any level of an IQ can see that people are being put against each other as so-called weapon systems.
I would agree with you.
On the level.
I would agree with you.
On the level.
Okay, Lenny.
Race, religion.
Lenny, I'm going to have to ask you to hold for 3 minutes. I will come back to you after the commercial break. Hello, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Lenny, and Lenny, you wanted to finish up. And I agree with you. We've always seen governments play divide and conquer. We saw it here in the United States even back in the 1960s with COINTELPRO, where they were deliberately trying to fan up racial tension between whites and blacks so that they wouldn't unite together in their joint opposition to the war in Vietnam.
Correct. And we see it now happening on a world stage where race, religion, education, and economics are being used to divide the people. But the people all have one thing in common. They're being screwed over by the same banking system. So if you could just figure that out, that would alleviate some of your problem. To the call in Alaska. As far as Saudi Arabia accusing Qatar of supporting terrorism, that's a little bit like McDonald's accusing Burger King of causing obesity and diabetes, isn't it?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Okay, now I want to move on to North Korea and them rejecting the UN sanctions. I'm with North Korea all the way because, and I agree with you, you know, if I give up my weapons like Saddam did, give up like Gaddafi did, and then the only thing that saved Assad was Putin, okay, because Putin saw that they were going to do the same thing. He's like, no, it's not going to happen this time. But as far as North Korea, no, I'm not giving up my weapons. In fact, not only do I reject the sanctions, I want to negotiate a deal. I want to negotiate the same deal the UN, has been giving Israel all these years. I think that's a good deal from North Korea.
Oh, that would definitely be a wonderful deal for North Korea or any other country, as a matter of fact here. But again, I do question Kim Jong-un's fiery rhetoric. I wish he would tone it down a little bit and give South Korea's new president, Moon Jae-in, a chance to reach that hand across the DMZ and say, let's talk about the reunification of the Koreas. That would really be the best course. But ultimately, you're right. Every nation on earth has a right to defend itself against possible invasion by the U.S. and its allies, because look at the last 17 years. That's what the U.S. is doing. They're going into countries that are unable, ill-equipped to defend themselves, and they're taking them over, one after the other, after the other, after the other.
Yeah, and who was that? Maybe you can help me here. Who was the one, I think it was one of the founding fathers, who said, for me to give up my gun leaves me at the mercy of the gentleman who's decided to keep his. So it's just common sense. You know, self-defense is a human right. It's a natural right. It's an animal right. Okay, God gave every creature the ability to fight or flight. Either you stand and fight against what's about to harm you, or you hightail it away and get away from it. So in this case, North Korea can't, but, you know, they're going to do what they have to do. And one more thing. As far as ISIS, as far as, you know, getting rid of the political correctness and getting rid of a lot of the symbols and stuff, Confederacy and statues and all this, there ain't but one other people who are doing that, and that's ISIS.
All right, well, listen, Lenny, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for station identification. We'll be back with Gilad Otzman after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome to our show again, and it's hour number 3. And joining us right now is Gilad Otzman, brilliant musician, lecturer, author. And Gilad, thank you for spending time with us today.
Man, it is great to talk to you again. It's been a long time.
Well, if I could impose a little bit of a personal moment here, the lovely lady Claire wanted to sit in on the beginning of the interview because she actually wanted to say hi to you and share her respect of being a brother musician.
Gilad, aloha and shalom.
Yeah.
I am so delighted.
You
oh,
are
I'm
well.
well.
A great musician.
I am well. I've just finished another piece of music I'm happy about. But I just wanted to say how much I respect your abilities as both a brilliant musician and innovator, but also as someone who is firmly believing that peace is possible and trying to show the world the way that it's supposed to go. I'm going to let you and Mike talk now, but it's just such a blessing to have you with us.
Thank you so much for your kind work. We should play together before we get too old, you know.
Oh, hey, so, you've got to come to Oahu.
Yeah, when are you going to gig in Hawaii? We'll be there.
I'll make sure that I make it happen.
Thank you.
It's too far, but I'll make sure. It almost happened a year ago, but I'll work on it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Nice one. Thank you for your words.
All right. We're going to turn Claire's microphone down here and getting on back to more serious things. There are so many things that we have to cover. First of all, your lecture tour, which I understand has been a tremendous success, even though there's been a lot of efforts to try and shut down venues. There's the music tour that's going on. There's your new book, Being in Time, which I haven't gotten quite to the end here, but it is just a tour de force of identity politics, the rise of Donald Trump.
It's been quite a while.
Okay, there was something else there for a second. And, of course, I want to talk about the Antifa attack on you as well. So, Gilad, just start at the beginning and tell us what's going on.
Yeah, so funny enough, I just came home. We had a book launch in London. Now it is 11 o'clock, 9 p.m. It started 6:30, and it was amazing. It was a really tremendous success. The room was packed. It took place in a Palestinian restaurant. They kind of just reserved it for us. And what was amazing for me was to see so many different people. Because I am critical of identity politics and some aspects within left thinking, I start to see more and more right-wing intellectuals attending my talks, and obviously they have a lot of problems with my criticism of identity politics, because I also I'm criticizing white identity politics. At the same time, I'm saying that if Jews can identify with their biology, with their Jewish mother, and black can do it, and lesbian can do it, and gays can do it, and transsexual can do it, obviously white people can also do it. I don't see why don't understand the logic that or the ethics that supposed to prevent them from doing so. But in general, I'm against all form of identity politics. And what was shocking for me is that they really ask questions in the most polite manner, and they allow me to produce an answer, and they take it home and they think about it, and it's an evolving discourse. It's something that I've never seen within left circuits, within the Palestinian solidarity discourse, and this is the reason, basically, that left has deteriorated into an echo chamber that is pretty much irrelevant to the world in which we are living and can hardly help us in amending the situation. It's quite tragic.
It does seem like they're living in a bit of a fantasy world these days. And
by the way, this is exactly the thing. What I argue in the new book, in Being in Time, is that the left is shaped like a dream. It is telling us what the world ought to be, and not as opposed to what the world is. And because it is concerned with what the world is ought to be, it is usually shaped as I mentioned, like a dream. It is utopian. And then Donald Trump is coming along, and we realize that the real utopia is nostalgia. Donald Trump won because he said, I want to make America great again. Now, exactly the same thing is happening in Britain. In Britain, we have a very different kind of type of a politician, but we have Jeremy Corbyn, who is gaining a lot of popularity these days, and there is a chance that I hope, that he will win the election without being his supporter, really. But he, again, delivered this nostalgic sense of a real old unionist lefty, something that really disappeared from the world. So it is all, we are living in a very interesting world at the moment. The problem that about the fantasy world is that if you are living in a dream and the left is a dream, you are really hostile to those who try to wake you up. You start to develop animosity towards the reality, because the reality in the real world, there is no revolution. We are just becoming more and more impoverished. And this is exactly the root cause of the animosity between the left and the working people, the left and reality, the left and the universe, and this is why the left really lost its relevance and was invaded by ludicrous ideas such as identity politics, political correctness, and so on and so on.
All right. Well, we need to take a moment to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Our guest here for this hour is Gilad Otzman, musician, lecturer, author, and he's in London right now. It's 11 o'clock at night. He's stayed up late to be with us, and he's continuing his lecture series. Again, his book is called Being in Time. It's available online right now, and it is a very, very wonderful book that talks about a lot of different topics, the history of repression, how repressive governments come about, and it brings us through why Donald Trump was such a powerful presence in the election last year, and why this pre-planned ascendancy of Hillary came to such a terrible end. And a lot of it does tie up to the fact that the left really just sort of moved away from dealing with the world as it really is. They got caught up in these fantasies about this utopia they all wanted to be living in. And when people come up and say, well, what you're doing doesn't work, as Gilad was saying, you get a lot of animosity. They don't really want to have an actual debate. They just want to cling to their belief structure. And Claire and I saw this with a close friend that we have who was a Hillary supporter, and she's a liberal, and we never had an actual debate with her. I would present a fact, and she'd just come on out with a soundbite. And that was her entire conscience, soundbite after soundbite after soundbite, as articles of faith.
It is very interesting that you are saying it, because if you understand that the left is structure like the night, like snoozing, like drifting away, and I try to wake you up, you will start to shout out some sound bites. Leave me alone. I want to sleep. It's too late. Talk to me tomorrow. And this is exactly how the left operates. Because it is structured like a dream, in fact, the only way to analyze left failure or the left fantasy is to use psychoanalytical terminology, because we are dealing with something that has the inherent tendency to become delusional and removed from the world. Now, it is quite embarrassing for me to say it, but I really hope that Corbyn will do very well in 2-3 days in the election year. But when you look at Corbyn, you realize that the guy didn't work a single day in his life. I mean, a proper job, not being a politician or a union or a trade union leader. I mean, a proper job, going to a factory, making music, producing something, being part of production, and when I'm saying production, doctors, nurses, they produce care, they produce something that is judged by the quality of the service that they provide or produce. This is something that is very, very problematic, and this is here, even in Britain, we are talking about Corbyn, who is an old-style lefty, and when you look at the demography of the split of the vote, is very popular amongst people under 20, voters under 25 years old. Between 25 to 35, it starts to shift, and when it comes to 45 onwards, the split, the vote, the labor share of the vote is close to none. We are talking about 10%, which is really, really embarrassing. It means that adults really do not vote labor. Now, when you look at the share of the votes, the way the vote splits between Tories and labor within the working class, it is clear that the majority, I wouldn't say the vast majority, but the majority of working class people in this country vote Tories. And this is quite strange, because the labor claims to work or to support the oppressed, so to say, and for some reason the oppressed do not accept the Tories as the labor as the representative, which is fascinating. It is fascinating to watch. The same you see in America. It was the blue collar Americans who made Trump into a president. Yes. And again, because they share very little with those delusional progressives. And by the way, I may be wrong, and I'm probably not allowed to talk about America, because this is really not my domain, but I think that if you would analyze it from a philosophical perspective, there are some similarities between Corbyn and Bernie Sanders. And like Corbyn, Bernie Sanders also didn't have a proper job, a single day in his life. And I think that he was supported by a lot of people within the Democratic Party, but I tend to believe that, again, it wasn't the working class people. It was the something that is similar to your Guardian readers, New York Times reader, Washington Post, and so on and so on.
Okay. Well, one of the things here is that, as you say, the liberals tend to live in this bit of a dream world of how they think the world ought to be, and because they weren't really dealing with things that were really going wrong with the country, they didn't want to face up to that. I think that's why they wound up trying to campaign on issues like what bathrooms people were going to use, and this whole idea of gender confusion, because if they're not willing to deal with the real problems of the country, then they had to just sort of manufacture something that they could claim to be an issue. And I think that's another reason why they did so poorly in the election, because most ordinary people were saying, I know what restroom I'm going to be using. This is just nonsense.
No, but this is exactly the issue. To start with, we both agree, and I assume that the vast majority of Americans and Brits would agree, that the most important thing in a society are production. So you make sure that we are a manufacturing society, so most people have a reason to wake up in the morning. 2, education. 3, health. Production, education, and health. Now, when we were young, the left claimed to unite us all. They said, it doesn't matter if you're a Jew or black or red or lesbian or gay or whatever. We are all united together to take care of education, production, health, to fight with the bad people in the city, the capitalists, or whatever you want to call it. What happened is that at a certain stage, the left gave up on this universal idea of uniting us all and adopted a new ideology, which is what you were just referring to, identity politics. It started to split us into marginal groups. We started to speak as a Jew, as a black, as a woman, as a Puerto Rican, as a lesbian, and so on, rather than fighting all of us together for the most important thing. We started to fight on different toilet settings, on gay marriage, on all these idiotic issues that have zero relevance to us as a society, as a collective. It made the left into a marginal system that leads nowhere. And to a certain extent, I really blame the left, it's basically the new left, it's not the old left, for the dystopia in which we live, not because it led us there, it just wasn't there to resist, to oppose, to perform proper dissent. Instead of fighting all of us together, we started to fight each other.
Well, you also need to look at the evolution of liberalism itself, because back in the 1960s, the liberal movement did constitute the intellectual elite of our society. But over time, individuals who wanted to be intellectually elite just said, well, I can call myself a liberal, and then everybody will assume I'm intellectually elite. But not all of them were. And worse, they became very insecure about those areas where they were not educated or did not have a good opinion. And so they overcompensated with a certain degree of arrogance and almost became arrogant in their ignorance on a lot of issues, like this friend of mine. So liberalism no longer represents the intellectual elite. There are intellectual elites on both sides. And so it sort of devolved into a personality cult, where the issue is no longer whether they're uniting people or dividing people. The issue is preserving their image of being liberal elitists. And you
now this is exactly why I call the book "Being in Time" a post-political manifesto, because there is no real division between left and right. It's a clubbing rather than ideology or a different perspective on truth. And in general, what I argue is that we, the people, have been reduced into mere consumers. While we are consumers, our politicians have one role. They are there to sustain consumption, and they are committed to big money rather than to us. So this is exactly the form of detachment that you were just describing. However, and this is, I think, very important, if I would have to summarize the the being in time and my new project into 3 words or 4 or 5 words, it is all really about the difference between Athens and Jerusalem. Athens is the birthplace of philosophy. In Athens, we think things through. This is where science was born. This is where aesthetic was formulated. This is the birth of music, the birth of dialogue. Jerusalem, on the other hand,
Gilad, I'm going to have to put you on hold here for a bit. We need 3 minutes for commercials. When we come on back, then I want you to continue with Jerusalem and its contrast with Athens. We'll be right back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show. We're talking with Gilad Otzman, a world-class musician, lecturer, author. We're talking about his new book, Being in Time. We're also going to get into the Antifa attack on him. And before the commercial break, Gilad was going down on a contrast between Athens and Jerusalem, how Athens was the cradle of democracy, science, so much of art and culture came out of the Greeks. And you wanted to tell us about Jerusalem in contrast.
Jerusalem, on the contrary, is the birthplace of the revelation. 10 commandments: do that, don't do that, don't do that. And what is very, very troubling for me is to understand. By the way, it's not a division, it's not a dichotomy between the Jews and the Gentiles, the Jews and the Goy. Unfortunately, Hillary Clinton is not a Jew, but she is a Jerusalemite. Tony Blair was a Jerusalemite. Theresa May is a Jerusalemite, and even Jeremy Corbyn is a Jerusalemite. And for me, the most concerning thing here is that the liberals, the progressives, those people who were supposed to be the good people, the people who move society forward, are actually Jerusalemites to the bone. They won't engage in an intellectual discussion with you because they know what is right and what is wrong. To a certain extent, the progressive, the liberal, is the secular form of chosenness, and this is why it is so attractive for emancipated or assimilated Jews, because it replaces chosenism. You know better. You know so much better that you really don't have to engage in an intellectual exchange. This is exactly why, once again, we come to the point that we are dealing with a delusional discourse that is inherently detached from reality, and this is why no one within Hillary Clinton campaign, for instance, could see that she was about to be wiped out in the election.
Well,
they didn't even see the possibility.
Well, what you're talking about here, we have a term for it over here in the United States. It's called the true believer mindset. The idea that people truly believe that they know what's best. They don't need to answer any challenges. It's okay for them to be above the law. We see that mindset certainly in the abuses of the Church of Scientology, where their acolytes are willing to go on out and commit all kinds of crimes and abuse because in their heart of hearts they believe that somehow they're making planet Earth better overall. You see a lot of that in liberalism as well, where they can go on out and have these riots on college campuses and say, well, in the long run, this is for the betterment of planet Earth. And it really is more of a religion than it is a political philosophy. But true believers... Yeah.
So, no, I totally agree with you. And this is exactly the symptom of Jerusalem. Now, if you look at America, at United States, I should say, really, the best thing that we associate with America, with the United States again, come from Athens.
Yes.
First Amendment. What are the two best things that happen in America? First Amendment and jazz. These are the embodiments of your free minds, free thinking.
Yes.
Even slavery and oppression turned into jazz, into the most creative, improvised form of music. Now, what is the opposite of freedom? Tyranny of correctness. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to think. You're not allowed to express yourself. Tyranny of correctness, I define it many times as, political correctness, as politics that doesn't allow political opposition. Now, this is the definition of tyranny, but while in the case of tyranny, you oppose a government or a regime or a tyrant, in the case of political correctness, it's self-suppression.
Okay.
It is you yourself, who silence your ability to think freely. And this is exactly how Jerusalem is structured.
Okay, Gilad, we got to take another 4-minute break for commercials, and we'll be right back about political correctness. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Gilad Atzmon. We're talking about his new book, Being in Time, which is now available online. And we were talking about political correctness as a self-imposed system of controlling what you think and what you say. More than a few people have drawn parallels between political correctness and George Orwell's Newspeak in 1984 in terms of crafting a system of thinking and speaking where if there wasn't a word for an unapproved idea, you could not have the unapproved idea. Where political correctness really destroyed itself is that it so often conflicted with what people could see going on in the real world. And obviously between the real world and a political dogma, the real world is always going to prevail, although the liberals would disagree with that.
I obviously agree with you, and I dedicated quite a lot of writing in Being in Time to Orwell, because what is so astonishing about Orwell is that Orwell really wrote about political correctness in 1948, while we realized that we started to realize that something was going wrong around the late 70s, 80s, and definitely 90s. And the next question is, how is it possible that Orwell managed to detect all of it in 30 years ahead of anyone else? Now, when we learned 1984 in school, they told us that it was basically a metaphorical take on a kind of a Stalinist regime in England. The thing is that this was very, very misleading, and this was kind of the Cold War take on 1984.
Yes.
1984 is certainly written about England. It is set in England, and it is there to explore the deterioration of left into tyranny, because George Orwell believed, I argue, that these tyrannical aspects are embedded in left thinking. How did he come to this conclusion? I believe that his experience in 1936 in Spain, and the book, the beautiful book he wrote about it, Homage to Catalonia, is there to suggest that in fighting within the Yiddish-speaking international brigade made him a strong opponent of Jerusalem. George Orwell was a staunch supporter of freedom of speech and liberties, and he could see that the left, the Stalinists, and the Trotskyites around him, he was actually fighting within the Trotskyites, and there was a big battle there between the Trotskyites and Stalinists, are not exactly friends to the idea of freedom of speech, human liberty, And it was there after the war when he realized that England or America, for the same reason, will deteriorate into tyranny of correctness.
Well, I would kind of like to move on here, and again, I encourage everybody to get the book, Being in Time here. Apparently, you were actually physically attacked at one point on your recent lecture tour. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I was supposed to speak last Tuesday. I was scheduled to speak in a radical bookshop in Edinburgh. I thought that it was a bit of... I looked at the bookshop and I saw that it's mainly an identitarian merchant that have very little to do with me. By the way, I'm happy to talk everywhere and to all people. My talks are always open to everybody, and I'm happy to be encountered by people who don't agree with me. At the moment, as I mentioned before, there's some right wing actually come to my talks and argue with me, and it's fascinating. It's fascinating for me, and I think that it is fascinating for them. However, the bookshop in Edinburgh cancelled the talk, and we moved the talk to a different place. But we didn't. We didn't publish the new location for the obvious reasons. We didn't want them to go under. We wanted to save them the harassment.
Yes.
And what we did, we met near the bookshop and redirected the audience to the new place. There were two kids, I think that they were in their early 20s, who came to the talk, and they were slightly confused. They didn't know anything about my work. I asked them, I wondered why did they come. They came with a kind of a strange story that the previous owner of the bookshop said that they should talk to me, and they probably didn't realize, but they were captured on a camera for 10 minutes talking to me. I pretty much explained to them my ideas, my ideology, where I come from, what I try to do, what I try to explore, what kind of questions I try to open. It was very friendly, and I wasn't suspicious at all. I've never been attacked for my views. I've noticed that people my detractors start to call me Nazi and fascist, and I never understood why, because there is no I never been associated or member of any party, definitely not the Nazi party, or it's just all those titles or that attributed to me have nothing to do with me. However, they offered me to help me with the gear, because I had quite a few books and I had my saxophone with me, and we had some camera gear. I wasn't suspicious. I let one of them carry my saxophone, which was probably a stupid thing to do. And as we were walking to the new venue, we were 5 or 6 people, because most people were already in the new venue. As we were marching to the new venue, suddenly 2 of them attacked me from behind. Apparently the third guy tried to get hold of our camera case, tried to take it from another guy who was actually friendly, was part of my, I didn't know him, but he was a genuine follower of my work. I managed to get my saxophone back, and this was pretty much the end of the story. They ran away. I wasn't injured, really.
Good.
If they try to, I'm quite big, and they were not really the right match. If they really want to hurt me, they will have to find some bigger guys.
Well, it looks to me like they wanted to take away your saxophone, so you couldn't play your music that night. And
this is the thing. If this is what they want, if this is what they wanted to do, they could just run away with my saxophone. They wanted to attack me. They pour something on me. There was a substance on my coat. I came to. It was a very bizarre attack. There are some things. Some people from the Antifa contacted me and said it's not the Antifa. The Antifa doesn't have an issue with me. I don't know. What I can say is that the police, the Scottish police, is taking it very seriously. Or somebody put on my Facebook the police communication. They have the pictures of them and they look into it, and we will find what it is. Maybe it was kind of again a false flag, they pretended to be Antifa, but they were not Antifa. I don't know. I cannot really say who they were, but I can clearly confirm that the Scottish police, is taking it very, very seriously.
Are the police looking at whatever it was that was thrown on your coat? I mean, was it a powder or a liquid? That to me is something that I think really does need to be looked at to make sure that they weren't trying to harm you with some kind of a chemical.
We looked into it. We thought later that it may have been an egg, but we don't know. I didn't have any kind of burn skin,
Okay, good.
Any sense of depending on or anything. As I said, and the first thing that I said, I really I didn't carry any injury that I can report after this attack, and I made it clear to the police. It is not that I'm hurt or damaged. I managed to rescue my saxophone. The guy that was carrying the camera gear managed to resist them and kept to it. They didn't manage to cause any damage. I never kind of looked into this Antifa. I looked into some of their videos. They are quite a strange kind of guys. I didn't have the impression that they knew exactly what they were doing. They definitely didn't know why they were attacking me. They were not aware of my ideas. Very, very strange.
Well, I think much of these groups are basically being bought and paid for by non-governmental organizations. We know that George Soros pours a lot of money into these groups that go on out and commit acts like this. We're getting close to the end of the show here, so where are you going from here? Where are you speaking next? Where are you playing next? Can you share that with us?
Yes, I actually, next week I'm in Germany for 8 days. I will be near Hamburg on the 10th, and then from the 13th to the 18th, I'm in Berlin at the A train. We will have also a book launch in the A train, I think on the 15th. And I'm coming back, and we'll have a book launch in Oxford. It's quite a busy schedule. I think that most of it is on my schedule on my website, gila.co.uk. I made it very clear to my detractors that the more violent and aggressive they are with me, the more harmonious and peaceful will be my reaction. I think that it reflects very badly on them, and I can defend myself, and I won't go the violent route which they try to impose on me. This is my way around things.
Well, that sounds really, really good. And in the time that we have remaining here, let's get on back to your book here, because you do talk an awful lot about how Trump just seemed to capture the imagination of the American people, how he was able to basically get around all the very obvious election fraud that was going on. So what are your comments on that?
Yeah, I think that it is very interesting to see how Trump managed to reinstate the sense of political exchange and dynamic political transition by, as I said before, by pointing at the fact that the past is way more exciting than dystopic future that was lined out by our so-called progressive. Now, the problem that we have with Trump is that the reality, Trump the symbol, we used to say it about Obama, Trump the symbol is not exactly the same as Trump the president. Now he's the president, I think, for 4 months by now, and he faces some serious problems, and I must admit that if he really wants to get to achieve anything, he will have to do a serious cleanup. Whether he can do it or not, this is a very big question. I would love to believe that he can. It's not very, very easy. I think that what we see at the moment with Kushner being looked at by the FBI in regard to this Russian file, I think that this is already part of the cleanup. And if I'm right, it is a positive move.
I agree. I absolutely agree here. All right, well, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come back for the last segment of our program, we're going to have about 4 minutes, and Gilad, I'd like you to be thinking about what you'd like to share with our listeners as we try and move forward through these very, very chaotic times. So we're going to go ahead and take a 3-minute break for commercials, and we'll be back with Gilad Atzmon and the end of our show after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our program today. We spent the last hour with Gilad Atzmon, world-class musician, author, lecturer, human rights activist. And Gilad, we've got about 4 minutes left in today's show. What would you like our listeners to be thinking about as we move forward in this time of chaos?
I think that if we agree that it is all about Athens versus Jerusalem, and we want Athens back, the one thing that we really want back is the ability to look at the truth, to be able to call a spade, to say no to Jerusalem Talmudism, to tyranny of correctness, to be able to say once again what we think, what we love to think, what we want to explore. The greatest thing about America is the First Amendment, and we want it once again to be precious, not just for us, but also to our oppressors. I think that this sums my ideas pretty well. How do you feel with it?
Well, no, I absolutely agree here. I grew up at a time where it was okay to say what you thought. and felt. And if you were wrong, other people were equally free to stand up and say, I think you made a mistake and you want to rethink that. Now, today, when you come up with something that is outside the accepted dogma, they simply say, well, you're politically incorrect, therefore you should just shut up. And it is a form of self-inflicted censorship where you stop saying certain things and after a while you stop thinking certain things. It's cultural Marxism is what it is.
Exactly. We didn't speak about cultural Marxism. I speak a lot about it in the book. And then the question that we have to ask ourselves is how is it possible that George Soros, who calls his institution that funds all those kind of organizations, the Open Society Institute, is actually the guy who funds all those oppressive measures that are there to suppress our ability to say what we think. In fact, George Soros and cultural Marxists are the arch enemies of the open society and the American true values of freedom of expression, and the First Amendment.
Well,
this is how things stand.
What George Soros means by open society is he wants this one world government that's open internally, but it will be history's greatest tyranny because it is being brought into existence through fraud, and they can never allow anybody to question the dogma. Anyway, there's the music time for us.
I totally agree.
Okay, Gilad, thank you very much for spending time with us today. Good luck on your tour and with your music, and we'll have you back on the show at some point in the near future.
Yeah, and love to both of you.
All right.
And your listeners. Thank you, man. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. All right, that's the end of our show. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Please take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We need to keep getting the real world out there in the face of all these liberals' daydreams. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.